This is Algebra Lesson 4.5, and in this lesson I'm going to show you 4 common families of functions. Now there are many, many more that you might see if you keep going into higher levels of math. There are some that you might even see that I'm not going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about 4 basic ones. The first one is the linear function, and this should be a function that everybody has experience with, hopefully. Y equals x is the parent function. You may have seen other representations. Y equals mx plus b, probably the most common one. There's also point slope form, which is y equals m in parentheses x minus x1 plus y1. Standard form, ax plus by equals c. I'm going to just write that one down because that's the one most people remember, but y equals x is the parent function. So any iteration of that, you can add, subtract, or multiply different values with that is going to be a parent function, and those are always going to be lines. That's why the word linear has the word line as its base. The parent function for y equals x goes right through the origin, and it goes diagonally in an increasing direction, equidistant between the x and the y-axis. That's why y equals x. The next one I'm going to write down is the quadratic. The parent function here is y equals x squared. Now this is a function that you may have seen if you've taken some algebra classes, or may have not. It's kind of a higher level one. But anywhere you see a power of 2, that's your quadratic function. The general form is ax squared plus bx plus c. There's other forms like factored form, y equals a, quantity x minus root 1, quantity x minus root 2. You have vertex form, y equals a, quantity x minus h squared plus k. Don't worry about that. These are just like a basic introduction to functions, because as we keep going in this course, in later chapters, we're going to focus very specifically on each of these individual functions. The quadratic parent function is called a parabola in shape. Parabola. But it's a U-shaped graph. It should hit the origin right at the bottom of that U shape. That bottom is called the vertex of the parabola, but it's always going to be a U-shaped graph. Next, let's talk about exponential functions. And the exponential function, parent function, is y equals a to the x. When we get into exponential functions in a couple chapters, we're going to use the form y equals a times b to the x. But a or b could be any value. You can have other numbers in there as well, but anywhere you have a power of x, that's going to be an exponential function. And the graph of that kind of looks like a rocket ship taking off. It's blasting off and then takes off to the sky there. Last function, I actually forgot, is the absolute value function. The parent function has 2 bars. And basically, absolute value means make the quantity positive. So it's kind of like our line. Our line increases from the origin and goes up. The difference between an absolute value and a linear function, though, is we don't have negatives. So instead of going down, like it did in the linear graph, it's going to just go up that same direction. So it's a symmetric graph. It's a V-shaped graph. It's the same as y equals x in the positives, but the negatives flip to positive because we're talking about distance rather than directional. So since distance, usually we don't talk about negative distance because whether I'm walking forwards or backwards, I'm still walking. They're all positive. So anyway, those are the 4 different functions, and in this section we're just going to talk about identifying them and maybe doing a little bit of evaluating. But each chapter moving forward is going to focus on those functions specifically, so we're not going to get too in deep just identifying and a little evaluating. So first of all, we have the function y equals 2x squared minus 8. What type of function is this? Anytime we see a power 2 as our highest power, we should recognize that as a quadratic function. Evaluate f of 2 just means substitute 2 in for the value of x. So this is 2 times 2 squared minus 8. You can use your handy-dandy calculator or your handy-dandy mental math for that one. I know 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 take away 8 is 0. Letter F says solve f of x equal 24. So this would be the reverse, where we would take our function and make it equal to 24. And then we can use our inverse operations to solve this. So we don't have generally any experience solving exponential equations. I wouldn't ask you to do that. You may or may not have experience solving quadratic equations, like this one. But you should have lots of experience solving linear equations. So I want to make sure that if I have any solve questions, I'm going to limit it to linear equations that you have experience solving. So I can solve this just like a linear equation. I'm going to add 8 to both sides to undo that. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides to undo that. So far, this is just like a linear equation. But now that I have a power 2, the opposite of a square is a square root. If that's not something you've done before, that's okay. We're actually going to talk about that more in depth when we get to our quadratic chapter. But that should be a 4 and a negative 4. Letter B, I have a couple pictures and I believe a couple of equations. We're just going to identify what type of function it is. So letter B, that graph is an exponential graph. It starts low, takes off like a rocket ship, exponential. Let's write a capital E for exponential. Letter B, looking at the graph, it's a U-shaped graph. U-shaped graphs are called quadratics, Q for quadratic. Letter C, that is a line, no special funky movement to it, L for linear function. Letter D, I'm given an equation, so rather than looking at a picture, I'm going to just think, well, what kind of symbols do I see? I see an X. I don't see any powers, I don't see any lines, no bars, so that's going to be linear. Number 6, I see these vertical bars here. Anywhere I see those vertical bars, that is my absolute value. And letter F, I see a power of X. Power of X means it's an exponential graph. That's it for this packet. Good luck on these exercises, and let me know if you have any questions.